Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night to you lovely folks joining me here nice and early at Marvel Snap Zone. Welcome back for the first episode of Infinite Decks of the Week for our Days of Futures Past season. It is time to take a look at some of the more unique and more interesting decks that have already made their way to the Infinite rank nice and early in this season. If you do enjoy this series, you've got to be sure to let me know. Leave a comment down below. Make sure you subscribe to the channel here at Marvel Snap Zone and leave a like on the video on your way out. So, when it comes to getting cubes super early in the season, it's pretty rare to see new and innovative decks popping up. They usually need time to be refined and are more popular later down the season. Instead, decks that have already gained player trust tend to take up the most of the player base, representing most of what makes it to the Infinite rank. And I promise you, as you may have also seen on our social media feeds, a lot of Thanos, Lockjaw, and Shuri Zero were making Infinite while we were preparing this piece. And to be honest, there was actually a good amount of Sarah Control as well, arguably the third best deck in the game right now. So you've opened this video and listened to me say this, and you think, HowlingMines, I already know this, these decks are good, everyone's playing them, that's not what I'm here for. And you're completely right, but don't worry. Although, definitely, those decks are very, very dominant in the Infinite rank population right now, I was able to find a few decks this week that are worthy of taking a look at. Let's start things off with a kind of variation of one of the offenders. We've got Shuri Nimrod here coming up for you. This one kind of popularized by Kraken over on social media as a way to lead the charge, as a slightly different take on Thanos or Shuri, but he does acknowledge that the meta is kind of nonsense and you do have to join them to some extent if you want to be doing that. I know that Kraken's tweet does mention they used Thanos Lockjaw as part of the climb as well, so we can't really assess how good this particular list is. However, Nimrod has been very disappointing overall so far, and the card only really seems to have found a home in Galactus decks, which are suffering from too much Aero, Cosmo, and Leech being in the metagame. As a result, several players praise this list as something potentially worth exploring. It felt good enough to include here as a result. In this variation, originally designed by Dara JN, the point is to offer another line of play than the traditional Shuri Red Skull Taskmaster at the cost of reducing our early potential. You can see that we choose to omit cards like Zero, Titania, and other cheap cards which are usually used to gain priority in this deck or as a complement to Taskmaster on turn 6, and in exchange for that we get access to a new play pattern of Electro into Nimrod, into Destroyer, into Arnhem Zola to create lots of Nimrods across all of our locations. The reason this deck makes sense is Shuri working as the bridge between both of these lines, as she can be used to buff Nimrod while multiplying the card afterwards, or it can just buff the Red Skull as you would expect in a more traditional line. It's a bit early to know whether this list has any chance of overtaking the more popular list, but it does give players a different way to build around Shuri, a card which became extremely predictable as of late and is often punished because of that. Onto the more exciting decks of the week, we've got Bounce making a resurgence to Infinite this week in the hands of Freddy Babes, a list that was originally pioneered by Jeff Hoogland, and we actually created a video on just the other day on the channel here if you're looking for some gameplay of it. It's been a really long time since we've seen Bounce being shared, let alone for an early season Infinite climb. Obviously, again, kind of hard to assess just how good this deck is, considering bots and the new 50 cube per league system have definitely made the climb a lot easier for some people, but even if we were taking these into account, the simple fact that Bounce is in this article should mean something. I mean, it has been at least 4 months before the Silver Surfer era since we really saw this archetype being discussed. For those of you who are familiar with the concept, you'll already know what's going on here, but for everybody else, a Bounce deck relies on Beast and Falcon in order to throw our cards back into our hand, and allows us to replay them over and over again throughout the course of the game. Doing so, we gain flexibility on where our positioning can go, where we can move our cards, and we have a shot at growing our Angela and Bishop to obscene amounts of power power while re-abusing many powerful on-reveal effects. The only arguably weird inclusion in this strategy is Killmonger, which actively works against some of our one-cost cards. In reality, Killmonger can be played after we've bounced our cards, however, to simply open up more space behind Angela sometimes as well, and is of course fantastic right now against Infinity Stones, Quinjet, and Sunspot. Freddy does mention they would choose to play Darkhawk in that slot, much like we did in our video, if you have access to it, so definitely worth keeping that one in mind if you're looking to try out this deck sometime soon. Last but not least, another favourite of mine making it onto the article this week in a deck I intend on finishing the climb with myself. Pool 3 only decks still have some good tools to work with here in the form of DoomWave. Again, if you're looking for gameplay of this one, I played it very recently on the channel myself and it's well worth checking out. This list was popularised by WWLossCCG, but it made Infinite in the hands of Phil Woodward this week and is well worth checking out because I love this deck and I think it's got a lot going for it right now. It was already in the discussion last season as a result of WWLoss sharing it before, but the list has definitely been quickly regarded as one of the best decks made up entirety of Pool 3 cards. It seems like DoomWave is still a valid choice for this season as well. It's obviously not packing the same high roll potential as something like Thanos Lockjaw or the sheer amount of points of something like Shuri Zero, but it certainly packs enough power to reward players with a sound, snapping, and retreating strategy. In this list, the goal is to seize priority by turn 4, then play Wave on turn 5, and have She-Hulk plus another power play available on turn 6. Most of the time that's going to be Aero or Doctor Doom in order to gain some control over your opponent's turn or counter an opposing Aero. This deck is not noteworthy of being in the S tier like the other dominant ones we talk about, but it does represent a fantastic option for players without the current top cards, or even those that are looking for a nice change of pace. The list is very flexible, it allows various counter cards to be included if you fancy them, such as Polaris, Cosmo, Magneto. This deck is a fantastic blank canvas for anyone looking to climb that is struggling with a somewhat limited collection. Let's be honest about the situation. Lockjaw Thanos and Shuri Zero are still taking the metagame hostage, especially if you looked at our recent tournament results. It's a difficult experience for a lot of players, and there are some exotic builds around, and the fact you can just face a chunk of bots on the way kind of guarantees that you can climb with anything if you're lucky enough. Otherwise, it really does feel like it's time for a balance patch in Marvel Snap. Not necessarily to restore balance, which seems to be a very difficult feat right now, but simply just to shake things up. A sizable part of the community is annoyed at the stranglehold that Thanos Lockjaw appears to have, and they just want to see the deck nuked from the stratosphere, honestly. During talks on social media, some players have expressed the fact they've never even tried Thanos Lockjaw because they're missing core cards. They don't want to see the deck demolished to the point where it becomes unplayable, like many are asking, because they want the chance to play with it themselves. So I guess the reasonable thing is to ask for just a different take. I'd love to see a shake-up. Once we expected to have, one that we did expect to have with Nimrod at the start of the season that unfortunately fell flat. And I think that's very much the key of what I'm looking for in this upcoming balance patch. It's difficult to know precisely what to do in order to get the metagame back on track without destroying the top decks in the format. But I guess we can only wait and find out and see for now. Hopefully that wait will not be too long. As always, if you want to talk about how you feel about these deck lists or what I've said in this video, feel free to leave a comment down below, or you can come and contact us directly in the Discord server with thousands and thousands of other players. Description box will have a link for that for you. Alternatively, you can find us directly on social media at Marvel Snap Zone, at HowlingMines, or at DenCCG if you'd like to talk about the article with Den. But until next time, I've been HowlingMines, you have been amazing, and this has been Marvel Snap Zone. Take care of yourself. Have a good one.